Hey everybody, Nick Olson, Chupacabra Offroad, and unfortunately this is a video I wish I didn't have to make, but the racing dream has come to an end for now. Let's get into it. So bad news everybody, I did unfortunately put the Chupacabra Offroad Razor Turbo race car up for sale last week, and she needs to go to a new home for the time being. I'm gonna go ahead and put racing on hold. So basically, instead of setting money on fire and continuing to race, I'm gonna go ahead and take that money, that time and energy and reinvest into the business. We're really in growth mode right now. We launched a bunch of new products recently. We've got some more we want to launch, so I just need to get really laser focused so we can grow this business, launch more products for you guys, you know, grow our sales, grow our distribution, grow our revenue, and racing can almost be a full-time job of running a business in itself. So the question now is, hey, are you done with racing and was it all it's cracked up to be? So from the time I decided to build this car, you know, I knew that I wasn't going to have the time and energy and money to really commit to racing, whether that be a complete series or big races like, you know, racing in Baja or even Vegas to Reno. But of course I wanted to give it a shot. I wanted to, you know, have the experience of building a car, document that experience, you know, race, and then also just kind of live out that dream of trying to see, you know, how would I stack up as a racer? So to answer that question, yes, I will be done for now, but definitely not done forever. And there might be some other opportunities to sneak in a race here and there. And I say that because it's kind of hard as you get into racing. You don't really sneak in or do it, you know, kind of halfway. You've got to go all in. You've got to get a vehicle that you know is going to be competitive. You got to spend the time to test and make sure it's competitive. And then from there, of course, next thing up is signing up for some races, some bigger races, longer races, which is something that I would like to do. So that's definitely still a dream. You know, there's plans one day to race Baja, maybe the Nora 1000, Vegas to Reno, those type of things, those big, long, tough races. But I want to kind of go through and talk about what I learned through the whole experience and what I would tell some of you that have watched all these videos, maybe get inspired or you're thinking about going racing yourself. So let's get into the top 4 things that I learned through this whole process of building a race car and going racing. All right, so the number 1 thing that I learned was that for the level of time, effort, energy, and commitment that I was able to put into this, I wouldn't have started with a 4-seat Razor chassis. I would have picked a 2-seat chassis vehicle, mainly because for a lot of race courses that I did race and see in race series, the 2-seater I think is a better overall fit. It gives you more flexibility if you want to do something like a works race. I think a 2-seat Can-Am chassis is basically the perfect wheelbase if you're down here in the Southwest and you want to do an AMA District 38 or a DP4 series. UTV World Championships is a great short vehicle course. It's tight and twisty. And even on some of these bigger, faster courses with bigger whoops, that vehicle works really well, gets a lot of overall wins. Even races like Parker, it seems like there's been a little bit more of a shift towards a 2-seat chassis. They are a better overall package because they're lighter weight, they're a little bit more nimble, and when you're lighter weight, you're gonna have better acceleration, better braking, and a less chance of overheating your belt, breaking your vehicle, so on and so forth. So I mentioned the Can-Am X3 just because that 102-inch wheelbase is pretty much perfect for almost all the terrain we would encounter here in the Southwest. From a racing perspective, I think the Razor Pro 2-seater would work really well. I mean, a 2-seat Turbo S is also, it's a little short, but you can still go fast. You can still be very competitive with that vehicle as well. Speaking of vehicles, you know, the Can-Am, I'm a little bit concerned if I was to go buy one or build one. The frame is so weak on those things that you might want to start with an all new frame together, or you have to really gust the hell out of it to make it hold up so your car isn't a big pile of mush after 5 or 6 or 7 races. So a lot of pros and cons between the vehicles. The Pro XP really has the clutching dialed and keeping the belt temps low, and seems like the belts have been pretty reliable. Also too, I mean, the speed I think is definitely going to be a real thing, and I think that little 2-seater, the little Bandit, the short one that's 96-inch wheelbase, I think that'd be a really good car. I think the Diablo is a 110-inch wheelbase. It would also work well, but I think the short Bandit will be very beefy. It's got all the same beefy components of the El Diablo and then the 4-seat, but it's going to be shorter, lightweight, 95-inch wheelbase. Like I said, it's going to work well in a lot of races, particularly with that extra beef. You're going to hope that the speed will require less, you know, maintenance, less money to put into them. You're not going to have to buy double shear hubs. You're not going to have to buy double shear, you know, suspension components. All that type of stuff's already on the vehicle. So remains to be seen. The Bandit's probably still a year away, but I think that's another good car option if you're looking to go racing here in the next couple of years in the Southwest. So moving on to number 2, it's very important that whoever touches your race car, the tuner with the motor, the tuner with the suspension, and also the parts that you choose based on the budget you have, that you're picking the right people, you're picking the best parts. Now, time is money. You get the wrong tuner like I did, you end up with a couple races where your car is not even competitive. I ended up having my motor blown from the first tuner most likely. And even the first suspension guy that touched it was way off. It wasn't even competitive to even driving a car fast. So I didn't have much confidence driving it fast. So, knowing what I know, the people that I've mentioned, Mark Queen is my new tuner, Wayne Israel sent at Alltech. These people really work with race cars. They get it. They bring a lot of added value on top of just tuning the motor, just tuning the suspension, but overlooking the vehicle, having ideas on how your specific vehicle might work, because each vehicle is different. Each vehicle is going to have its own challenges with cooling, suspension setup, based on what you're running with your parts and accessories, where you like to race, how you like to drive, all that type of thing. So the right people, and then also investing in some of the right parts. Something like investing in a really good steering rack is probably going to save you money in the long run. You might not want to spend all that money up front, but if it's something that you can rebuild and it might not cost you a DNF, now all of a sudden you've saved money from all that time, energy to go out to a race and break a component where you saved a few dollars. And that's a challenge, because everyone on some level has a budget, and you want to try to make these decisions on what's going to get you to the finish line, what will allow you to be competitive without spending too much money. So it's a very complicated matrix. Hopefully the video series we did here helps you with some of the parts that I've chose, the trials and tribulations of who I worked with, and helps get you down the track of getting your setup dialed, so you're saving time, you're saving heartache, ultimately you're saving money, and you're gonna be more competitive when you do hit that starting line. So part 3, test, and then test some more. Is something that I wish I would have done more, that I thought I did but didn't test hard enough, to also ultimately save time, effort, and money, so that you're not having any mechanical issues during a race. Now, I mentioned all these things getting the vehicle set up, right? And you think the easy part is just driving it. Well, the harsh reality is that most of us aren't super fast, talented drivers, and you need time to gel with your machine, to build that confidence, to learn how to drive it fast, so you're not making mistakes that either cost you, a couple milliseconds in every turn. It's easier on your machine. You learn how to flow with momentum. Same rules apply in off-road racing. It's just like motocross, right? You've got to corner for dough. You've got to use your momentum. It makes it easier on the machine, keeps your belt temperatures down, allows you to just take that inertia and keep flowing around a race course, which then makes you a better driver, which makes your vehicle, hold up better, all those type of things. And those are the type of things you can learn when you do get that seat time testing. You got to test hard. One of my buddies told me, who's a fast competitive racer, you got to test like you're racing. That's the only way you're going to find out if your temperatures start to peak. I didn't learn that until I got to my first race. We spent all weekend trying to chase this gremlin, and still had issues. So, there's getting to the finish line, which is cool, but then there's also being competitive. And you really have to allocate into your budget of time, your budget of money, to be able to take your vehicle out and go run it on those test miles and keep track of how many miles you're putting on your vehicle, so you can then prep it accordingly. Make sure you're replacing your hardware, things that might wear out, and you might end up putting a couple hundred test miles on your vehicle before you go race it, and you need to factor that into your budget. But I think that is time and money very well spent. That's going to lead you to a lot more checker flags. The fourth point that I learned was that I really like the experience of a longer desert race. Like I mentioned, 2C vehicles, some of these races are shorter, they're sprint races. That's cool, but the car that I built was really bigger and set up to do well in a longer race. And I really think that's what the essence of desert racing is. I think it's got to be longer than an hour or two. So those short little races are sprint races, and there's a lot coming at you quickly when you're a newbie. When I did race the UTV World Championships, it was about 150 miles, but those laps were 55 minutes. So it was a longer race, and honestly, that was a dream come true. I mean, we had some issues in qualifying. My car was overheating, and we lost probably 10-12 seconds, and we still qualified fourth. So that gave me a huge confidence boost that I had the driving ability to be competitive on just raw speed. And once we got into the race day, we made some changes to the car, and we didn't have to worry about the temperature. And we didn't get to pre-run the course, but lap 3 and 4, we started to make time up on people. We started climbing the ladder. I mean, we pretty much had a podium in sight had we not broken a bolt on our suspension. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, but either way, that longer race to me is like the essence of what off-road desert racing is, where you have a strategy, you can't go wide open, you've got to be thoughtful with each turn. It's hard. It was hard for me to figure out, was I driving fast? Was I keeping the pace up? You've really got to have a lot of mental alertness for a long period of time, and so you are flowing, so you're not leaving those milliseconds on the table with each turn, and you're putting together good consistent laps where you're not being hard on the vehicle. So that's what I think the real essence of it is. And even if I did it again with a 2-seat short vehicle, I think that's what I'd like to do, is just some longer races. Unfortunately at Parker, we were slated to go 250 miles, but we had a DNF. And when you're at these races, you start to notice the last lap of the race, the last hour of the race, there's not near as many vehicles circulating. So, at Parker, I wish I would have been a little bit more patient. It doesn't really matter what happens in the first lap. For most of us that aren't going for a win in the Pro Turbo class, you can kind of be patient and then work on upping your pace, keeping them moving, because these vehicles, are not going to hold together if you overdrive them. It's proven time and time again, most recently at the UTV World Championships this last weekend, where the attrition rate was really bad. So that's what I learned. I think hopefully those things benefit you guys if you decide to do go racing, and again, if this YouTube series inspired you to do so. So those are some lessons that I learned. Hopefully it helps you on your future racing endeavor if you're thinking about doing it. And speaking of which, here's a couple more tips. If you say, hey Nick, I've watched the videos, I'm going for it. Here's what I would tell you or tell myself if I'm gonna go racing tomorrow. The first thing I would say is, unless you really have an unlimited budget and you just want that experience of building a car from scratch, I would seriously consider buying a used race car. Now, I'm not telling you that just because my car is used and it's for sale, but I'm telling you that because you guys have seen, if you watch some of the YouTube videos, what I've gone through and what I've learned. So the value of what I've learned has really been translated to a vehicle now that handles very predictably, that has low temperatures, that has the right parts, where it's a lot of things checked off the list that you don't have to worry about, so you can focus on driving. So you can focus on tweaking the car to how you like to drive it, learning how to drive it, learning what the vehicle can withstand. Because anybody who's gone down this rabbit hole of racing, they've had these trials and tribulations at the first few races, I guarantee it. And even if they have had a good run, they've also figured out ways to make the car handle better, faster, cooler, etc. So don't discount a used car. You got to be careful, know what you're looking for. Make sure you're not buying something that's hammered or been rolled a bunch of times, or has really been rode hard and put up wet. You can see some of the parts on it and kind of get a good idea of how it's been maintained. Has it been maintained with the right parts and people aren't cutting corners? Look at how it's wired. But I think that's a really viable, especially right now, it's a really viable path right now, because if you do want to buy a new car, builders are really backed up a ways out, cost of raw materials, etc. You're going to save money, you're going to save time, and there's a big learning curve. So the more time you can save, the more you can learn about getting the vehicle to perform better, the better you're going to do, the more fun you're going to have. So speaking of buying a car, Nick, what car would you buy? What car should I buy? At this moment in time, it's October 2021. Polaris has a big release coming up with a new vehicle that could be in a different class. The X3, obviously, it's been out. We know what to expect with it, its strengths and its weaknesses. And also with the speed, it's kind of hard to tell when people are going to actually get one, which vehicle they're going to get. I mean, that's still a ways out. So I feel like hanging tight and waiting, observing right now is not a bad idea, particularly to see at least what Polaris does. With the release of a new Polaris or a new Speed, we all have this dream that the bar is going to be upped. The reliability is going to be better, so you're going to be able to be competitive without replacing near as many parts. It's my expectation, of course, that the Speed's going to be very reliable with how beefy the suspension and a lot of the components are. It's also my expectation with some of the new Polaris is that they're going to beef up a lot of these little parts that you can still race and keep stock, because some of the fastest racers are still running a lot of stock parts. There is something to be said for running as many stock parts as possible. Of course, they're cheaper, they're generally lighter weight, they're generally pretty well engineered, and if you can get away with them without any failures, it's the best way to go, whether that's clutches, knuckles, wheel bearings, etc. So it's always the hope with a new vehicle release that we're going to get more for our money. The vehicles are going to be tougher, so there's less money you have to put into them to be able to go out and hammer your car on race day. One other point about kind of hanging tight and waiting to see what the market does in terms of vehicles, I would also pay attention to what's going on with different classes. Best in the Desert is the premier series here in the Southwest. They started the rally class as a budget class, and now there's people in that class running $70, $80, $90, $100,000 cars. So, there's no such thing as somebody that can't kind of cherry pick or whatever you want to call it, to spend a lot of money in more of a beginner class, and that will happen, and for those of us that are maybe more budget racers. But I think there's a lot of changes in the classes right now to kind of level it out. I think we're just kind of in this interesting space where, I mean, there's guys spending $250,000 in the pro production triple class of Best in the Desert. And unless you really have the time, the resources, the effort, and the money to compete with that class, with those top 10 teams, you know, good luck to you, because they're very dialed. A lot of them have the resources and they have the experience and seat time that they're going to be very hard to beat and just kind of crack into the top 5. So pay attention to the rules, check out the race results. Best in the Desert is a good barometer because you can kind of see everyone's finish time at races in different classes. You can get an idea of how fast or slow one class is versus the next. So it gives you an idea of where you can kind of get in where you fit in based on your energy, effort, you know, budget. A lot of these other smaller race series will just kind of show the position. They won't really show the times, but that leads into my next tip, which is definitely go out to a couple races that you would like to race yourself, whatever series that might be. Go help a team in the pits. You're going to quickly get an idea of which teams run fast, what parts are on their vehicle, you know, what the hot setup is at one race or another, one series or another, and you're going to learn a lot. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that the racers know, the race teams know, particularly teams that are consistently finishing in the top half or the top, you know, 10% of the class. So it's a steep learning curve, guys. If you've seen anything with all my videos, it takes a lot to go from wanting to build a car to build it to actually being competitive. And hopefully this video series has helped you, maybe inspired you. And like I said, it's not the end of it forever with me. I'll be back with more. But getting out there, getting your hands dirty, working with a team, you can learn a lot at some of these races very quickly. And if you guys do get into racing yourselves, you're gonna need those same people to help support you, with pit stop people. So it's always good to network and find people, because it's gonna take more than a driver and a co-driver to show up. You gotta have a solid person that can help you prep. You have to have a solid person you can rely on for your fuel stops at least, and then a logistics person. So it's a team effort. You gotta have a whole team. Like I mentioned earlier, it's almost like running a business in itself, and takes a lot more energy on that regard than I ever anticipated. You know, you just focus on, hey, I'm gonna get the car, I'm gonna get it dialed, and I'm gonna drive it fast. Well, you know, it's more than that. So hopefully this pointer gives you something to think about. And hopefully, if you're thinking about going racing, you got a group of guys or people that you can rely on that are gonna help support you on your racing venture. So I hope these tips are helpful. That's it for me on the So You Wanna Go Racing series, but don't count me out. You know, maybe I'll do a race like Nora. The Nora 1000, from what I've heard, is an amazingly fun race, and it sounds like it's right up my alley where, you know, you can have fun. It's not a long, non-stop race, but you're gonna go all the way down the coast of Mexico, or down the peninsula rather, and, you know, get to have that experience with friends and family. I could have my dad in the car, my wife in the car, you know, friends, that type of thing. So I might do something like that. Also, that's a race you can do in a stock vehicle. So it's not cheap, but you don't need a full-blown race car to do it. You know, maybe I'll show up in the next couple of years and do something like that, or who knows, maybe as we grow the business here, I'll get back into it here in a little bit. So maybe my kids will get into it and I'll be the racer dad. It's hard to say. That's where we're at. Hopefully you guys like this content. If you do, please like and subscribe. As always, we've got a whole lot more content coming your way.